Welcome, folks. Hello, hello. Thanks so much for joining us. Great to see you. Thank you for joining. Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us. All right. Welcome. Hi, everyone. Happy Monday evening to everyone. It's great to see you all. Thanks for joining us on such a lovely evening with such nice weather. Or if you're watching this later, thank you as well for joining. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Lily Talcott, and I have the honor of serving as Deputy Superintendent for the Ithaca City School District. And with me are a number of fabulous educators. I'm going to let them introduce themselves, and I'm going to ask the folks at Boynton to start and introduce themselves. So we'll start with Lauren and Dan and Kathleen, and then we'll transition to the folks at DeWitt, and we'll hear from Carlin and Donna and Susan.
All right. Thank you, Lily. Good evening, everyone. My name is Lauren Wright. I am the principal over at Boynton Middle School. We're excited to have you here tonight. And there's others from our Boynton team who I will introduce themselves now.
Thanks, Lauren. Good evening, everyone. I'm Dan McGrath. I'm the Associate Principal at Boynton, and thank you for joining us tonight.
Good evening. I'm Kathleen Cole, and I am a math teacher and the math department leader at Boynton. I currently teach 8th grade.
Good evening. My name is Carlin Gray. I am the DeWitt Middle School principal, and I was for many years at IHS. Welcome.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Donna Lucy Lunder. I am the Associate Principal at DeWitt Middle School, and it's great to be here with you this evening.
Hi, everyone. I'm Susan Danskin. I'm the math department leader at DeWitt and an 8th grade math teacher. Welcome and thank you for coming tonight.
Thank you all. These are fabulous educators and frankly, wonderful people as well. And this evening, they're going to help walk us through some options for young people at the middle school level, particularly around middle school math. Carlin, if you wouldn't mind transitioning to the next slide, that'd be great. So we wanted to start out and let you know we now have a live webpage that houses a number of documents that we're going to be referencing this evening. So feel free to navigate to that space and start to explore. If you're a multitasker, feel free to take a look while we're talking. And if you're not a multitasker, feel free to take a look in a linear fashion as we start to go through the presentation. Additionally, as we talk, feel free to ask questions directly to the host. So you can send any chat questions to the person marked as host. Her name's actually Emily Tracy Arm, and she's also a fabulous colleague of ours. And then at the end, once we've made our way through the program, we will take a number of questions from the audience. And so we'll be tracking those as well. And if for some reason we run out of time and don't get to all of them, don't worry, we'll be updating that website and including answers to your questions in the future. All right, so I am going to turn it over to the fabulous folks over at Boynton. They're actually going to talk about all of the options that are present for our young people.
Yes, thank you, Lily. All right, so this is a graph that we're going to give you some time to just briefly look at tonight. But as Lily said, it's going to be, all these items are going to be added to the middle school math website. But we also will make sure that these are available in other places. We'll have it on our Boynton website. This graphic in particular will be really helpful as we are wrapping up the school year and begin to have scheduling conversations. We will also be sharing this out. I'll share this out in my family updates so that you have multiple opportunities to take a look at it. But you can see that this breaks things down by grade level. So we have 6th, 7th, and 8th grade for each column. And then within each row, it helps to show what students are all enrolled in, and then an area where they must make a choice, and then some optional areas for them to choose from in that bottom row. One of the things that you'll notice is as they transition from 6th to 8th grade, their choice increases. So they'll have more classes that they'll envision start with music, and we'll eventually be adding in foreign language. And then by 8th grade, they'll need to make choices in foreign language, world language, science, math, and then some of their music choices as well. So this is a really helpful graphic just to see the different options that students have available to them, and to kind of lay things out as you're planning their overall experience at the middle school level. And were you gonna talk through the next slide on the Do It version?
Yeah, is that me or Donna? I forget. All right, I'll jump in. So this is a very similar experience. I hope my audio is all right. The choices that you see, a lot of them are increasing as you get towards 8th grade. A lot of our variability comes in the way that we name or identify our music courses, and then where we have family and consumer science. So very similar, and again, I will send this out to all families so that they can see it, and it will also be available on our website. So at this point, I'm going to transition to a timeline here, which I will start off by saying that in my 15 years at the high school, prior to 2013, and starting 2013 and beyond, we did a lot of work tracking all of our 9th grade and lower level courses. And by lower level, I just mean taken by 9th and 10th graders. So our courses for 9th and 10th were very slowly detracked, starting with math, and then we detracked English, or de-leveled English, and we de-leveled additional courses, including global. And a great example, additional example of this is that we used to, when I first started at high school, we had 4 levels of biology, and now we have 1 level of biology where all students take biology and experience it together. And then at this point, Susan's going to jump in and talk about how this has shifted from now until, from 2016 on to where we are now in this process.
Thanks, Carlin. So prior to, like, while the high school was doing its transitioning, Steve Weisberg was always in our ear at the middle school, like, pushing, you should be offering a heterogeneous program at the middle school. And it didn't quite get off the ground until when the Common Core standards came into play, and we started realizing that the difference between our Math 8 course and our expanded course wasn't that big a difference anymore because of the higher expectations of the Common Core curriculum. So started thinking about, do we really need both Math 8 and Expanded 8? Probably somewhere in the 14, 15, 16 school year. In the 2017 school year, I had 2 experiences with one of my Math 8 classes. One, there was a particular day when we were working away, and one of the kids looked at me and said, Ms. Danskin, you realize you're the only white person in the room. And that was devastating in terms of what we're doing for equity and access. Prior to that, I had already started looking. It happened to be a day that there were students who were absent, but even so, looking at the makeup of all of the Math 8 classes, Dan McGrath taught math at DeWitt at the same time. We were both looking at our classes and were appalled at the number of students of color who were being placed into the Math 8 program. As opposed to the expanded program. So in 2018, we decided to start a pilot at DeWitt. There wasn't really time frame wise, it wasn't feasible to start at both schools at once. So a pilot in one school was the way to go. Things went very well during that year. In 2019, Boynton joined us with that 8th grade heterogeneous program, just offering a Math 8 course and an algebra course. But we also, during that time span, we're looking at not just 8th grade, but the entire program and said, okay, we're going to do this in 8th grade, but we're also going to go back and start at 6th grade. So in 2019, our first cohort of 6th graders at both Boynton and DeWitt started progressing through our current heterogeneous program. We're now in the 2020-21 school year, and 7th grade has now been detracked. We just offer Math 7. So those students who started last year as 6th graders in the heterogeneous program continued to 7th grade and will progress to the 8th grade where we only have Math 8 and algebra. So that's just a little bit of history for you if you haven't heard it before.
All right, good evening. So I'm going to talk about, now that we're making the shift in 6th and 7th grade, we also have to make a shift on how students are going to get into algebra. So we took a look at all of our processes and we sat down as a group of teachers and we decided that we want to let the content standards help us guide who gets into algebra. So we looked over the 7th grade curriculum and we've identified 4 content areas and 2 standards for math practice areas. And we are going to look at those and how students are performing at the 7th grade level to help guide us into deciding who is going to take algebra as an 8th grader. So as we're looking at these categories, students have to have at least a 3 on all 6 of those identified categories to be eligible for Algebra 1. And within the course of the 6 categories, they have to have at least 2 level 4s in any of these categories. Now, one of the things we know is that the experience throughout the course of the year, lots of things can happen. And we wanted to account for students that had 3s on everything and they were able, except for one of the 6. We didn't want that to be a limiting factor. So if a student is not able to meet the criteria, then we are going to offer an assessment in June to reassess them on the standards that they did not perform at a level 3 on. If they are needing to get to a level 4, they can also take a test on those standards to try to raise that to a level 4. So this is going to be the criteria with our standards-based grading. We're using levels 3 and level 4 on those 6 identified categories. And we can go on to the next slide. All right, so we called those our priority standards for 7th grade. And this is just a picture of the slide. You can access it on the webpage. And I just want to talk you through all 6 of the categories. The first category, as you see here, is ratios and proportional reasoning. Now, within that, there are 3 New York State content standards that students have to do well on. So in those categories and get an overall 3 in category 1. So the other categories, which you can't see here, are the number system, expressions, equations, and then our 2 categories for our standards of math practice will be communicating mathematically and interpreting mathematically. So those are the 6 categories that we will be looking at students' grades in in order to determine their eligibility for Algebra 1 in 8th grade.
Good evening. What will the additional math course look like? So students that take algebra will now have to take a course to help bridge that gap between 7th grade math and algebra. So there will be a course offered in Canvas that will have 5 units. It will cover the topics from the 8th grade curriculum that either don't merge well into algebra or are prerequisites for algebra. So we've gone through all of those 8th grade standards and put them into categories and decided some of them are things they're going to need to know right off the bat, and some are things that they can learn throughout the year. And we put them into 5 different units that will be taught throughout that course. Those standards that will be taught in the supplemental course are linked on the district Math Live website.
Sorry, forgot to unmute. So this additional course, how does it fit into your child's schedule? There are several options that we'll be offering. So students can take this additional course this summer prior to taking algebra next year. So the summer between 7th and 8th grade. So they would have the prerequisites already taken care of before they even got to the course. That's not the only choice, though. If a student is away for the summer, is not interested in participating, has other activities during the summer, we will also be offering the course throughout the 8th grade year. And in order to accommodate other music choices and other electives, we will be offering this course kind of like the high school offers 0 period. We will be offering this course before school, after school, and during the school day. And it's been organized, that content that Kathleen referred to has been organized in such a way that if it's a prerequisite for something that happens in algebra and they're taking it through during the school year, they will do that prerequisite material in this companion course before they get to the material in the algebra course. And we also are offering students the option to opt out, or not opt out, I'm sorry, test out of this companion course. And I believe the content areas, those 5 topics, are being presented on that website. So if you have a child who's interested in the test out option, take a look at the website. It will give you the information on what they should be preparing for if they choose the test out option. Can we go to the next slide? So regarding that test out, we will be offering it in June and making sure that we communicate that with both students and families in a variety of ways. So you can be looking for information on that math website. You can be looking for information coming directly to you through emails from school, announcements in Canvas to both students and families. Will be ways that we make sure that everyone is aware of the offering of this test. And of course, not relevant probably to anybody who's in this meeting, but if there are new entrants to the district, we will be making opportunities for those new entrants as they come to place out of the companion course. Thank you.
All right, how are we differentiating in algebra across both schools? So this is sort of like 2-pronged. There's supporting students outside of the class time, and then there's supporting students within the algebra class itself. So first I'll talk about the supports outside of class. The first one listed there, before school. I've been teaching Algebra 1 for, oh gosh, a lot of years. And typically I work with kids every day between 8:30 and 9. So I'm hoping to get back to that soon. Right now with our restrictions and all the regulations we have and who we can have in the building and all of that. Kids are not allowed in the building that early yet. So we've not done that this year, but hope to get back to that next year. But it's a really good time to just sort of check in with kids, answer questions, support them. Another area we offer support outside of the class time is during math labs. So those are kind of fluid. Kids can come in If they're struggling and having a tough time on maybe a certain topic, they can enter into a lab, stay in a lab for a while until they're comfortable. If they get comfortable and want to exit the lab, that's always an option. So we're hoping to keep those nice and fluid. The next two sort of go together, family meetings and individualized intervention plans. Something we've done for years that we will continue to do is if we see we have any students that are struggling, we set up family meetings with the student and the families, come in or do it, via a Google Meet, meet with that family, meet with that student, and create a plan of action for that student, including things like coming in before school, trying out a lab, study strategies, all of those things. And we come up with a real solid plan for that student moving forward to help support them. The last one in this area is co-teaching as a possibility. As we look forward to next year and some of the things that we might be able to offer to help us really be able to differentiate to the best we can, co-teaching is a possibility. It kind of opens some doors and allows you to do some more things when you think of differentiation. I'm going to transition to within the class time itself. And whoops, you go back a slide. Thank you. Supporting students within class time. There are several things listed here. I don't think I'm going to go into depth into each one. I'm going to talk more broadly afterwards, but there's scaffolding built into particular lessons. So each lesson has entry points for different kids and different tangents kids can take to help get them to the next level. Along with that would go the targeted gap bridging within lessons. We currently do a lot of that right now, just because kids are in such different places and have come from different experiences, and this distance learning has been different for everybody. So we do quite a bit of that currently, and we'll continue to further that and figure out how to do that better even more next year. Cooperative group work, something we currently do and we'll hope to grow. Multimodal lessons. I will say myself as a teacher, I have learned so much since last year. I've learned to use technology and use different digital platforms in ways I never knew existed. So all of that is stuff that we're going to continue to use to help support the students within the algebra course next year. Thank you.
One of our major goals is to create a more equitable experience for all of our students than we have in the past. And we're taking many approaches, and we just wanted to outline a few of them. So in 6th and 7th grade, all students are taking grade level content. We're not accelerating anymore. It's differentiated, and there are co-teachers in all of those classes to allow us to meet the needs of all the students. We have created a system that will allow multiple different ways to get into algebra. Tonight, we're talking about 8th grade, getting into algebra in 8th grade. Now, later on, we're going to talk about other pathways. So they didn't always exist in the past. They weren't used widely if they did exist. And so we're making sure that they're there and they exist, so students can do it other than just 8th grade. By using standards-based grading and looking at those to help us identify the students for algebra, we're trying to remove the subjectivity as much as we possibly can. We're looking about how to get support structures for all of our students and keep them enrolled in algebra as they get in there. And making sure we identify students early on and get them the supports in the classrooms that we have. As we are building in all these extra supports, making sure we're getting those supports to the students so that they can be successful and have all of these opportunities for them.
So, what if my child wants to do band and orchestra, earth science and algebra? We have taken this into consideration, and they can. However, that will also mean they will have a full schedule. We have been meeting with the Fine and Performing Arts Department to make sure that we are not limiting opportunities with this new structure. Next slide, please. What opportunities do learners have to explore their artistic voices? Students in 6th, 7th, and 8th grades can further their skill development and creative identities through music, chorus, band, and orchestra, also in studio art and media arts, through musical theater, drama, and performance. Next slide, please.
Thanks, Donna. So I want to emphasize that we keep talking about acceleration, and speeding up is the idea that you're going to get somewhere faster than other people. And I think we have to ask ourselves, where are we going? So if you work backwards and talk about acceleration, when we talk about acceleration into algebra in 8th grade, what we're really talking about is access to calculus in 12th grade. So students that are taking algebra in 8th grade actually will go through a sequence of math courses that are a series of prerequisites that will end up getting you or accessing AP Calculus AB and AP Calculus BC. But I do want to remind folks that the urge to accelerate can sort of happen at any point. And this is what Dan was talking about earlier when he was talking about increasing access through different routes. And some of I want to sort of back us up and say that you can double up in math in 10th grade. So many students will take geometry and algebra 2, since geometry is not actually a prerequisite for algebra 2. Although we talk about it through a grade lens and a sequence of courses, the content of geometry is not directly linked to success in algebra 2. They're very different types of thinking and very different types of problem solving. Additionally, we have kids and students and families who have accessed pre-calculus at TC3 the summer before 12th grade. Similarly, many students have done some practices like this when trying to access different levels of chemistry at the high school. So this accessing courses through TC3 has been done before. And I want to remind folks that additionally, the sequence that you would normally go into in high school would be 9th grade would be algebra, 10th grade geometry, 11th grade algebra 2, and then the next option could also be AP statistics, and many students focus on getting to AP statistics as an end goal, which we're finding is much not more, but a different kind of helpful when kids and students are accessing, especially medical fields. So students who are interested in biomedical engineering, for example, are very, very interested in having AP statistics as part of their repertoire. So again, there's multi-tiers and levels of accessibility, but I want to remind folks that AP Calculus is not always the end game, that it could be AP Statistics. High-level math classes like pre-calculus are still very rigorous, and colleges look forward to meeting students where they are. So that is sort of some insight into what happens at the high school after you're there in terms of pathways to acceleration. And those are the experiences that I've worked with many families. And I think at this point, we are going to transition to some questions.
Absolutely correct. Thank you so much, folks. Carlin, I think we're good with the PowerPoint. Thank you so much for being our MC of the PowerPoint. Very much appreciate it. And folks have been sending us, they sent some questions beforehand. We're grateful for that. Thank you. Hopefully we answered many of those because we were able to take a look at those beforehand. And then there are a number of questions that are coming through currently. All right. So there are some questions in regard to the acceleration test that will be offered to incoming 6th graders. So at this time, we certainly wish we knew precisely when and in what mode we will be giving that. And of course, are exploring a number of options. But COVID, of course, has limited some of those options. So we're obviously, we would like folks, we need kiddos to be in person in order to take that acceleration test, right? So we're exploring a number of options to make sure that that's equitable and offered to young people in a way that that is supportive. So be on the lookout for that information coming up. There are certainly questions about what the content is on that test, and I would be happy to let Ms. Cole or Ms. Danskin, or both of them, talk just a little bit about what that's like, and really what the purpose is, right, for young people there with that exam for those incoming 6th graders. Would either of you like to talk a little bit about it?
Sure. And Kathleen, feel free to jump in. I think we both unmuted at the same time. So the acceleration course test is this year, I believe we offered it on a Wednesday because of the asynchronous Wednesday, and it was an in-person exam, and the district provided transportation in cases where students needed transportation. We'll see what next year's schedule looks like and incorporate it, as Lily said, in whatever way is most accessible for all students who are interested in accelerating. And in that case, that acceleration would mean skipping 6th grade math and taking 7th grade math as a 6th grader. I believe we will not be accelerating beyond a 6 to 7 level. And in terms of the content of the course, the best thing that we can recommend is that you visit niced.gov, and that is the New York State Education Department, and they have the next generation standards by grade level. And if you find it difficult to navigate and find your way to those 6th grade next generation math standards, please feel free to reach out to either Kathleen or myself, and we can email you a PDF or a link specifically.
I think the only thing, Susan, I think I just want to briefly add is the assessment covers the 6th grade standards, but it also has a lot of problem solving and thinking questions on it also. So there's sort of 2 different types of questions. There's ones based directly on the standards, the content standards, and there's others that are more based on sort of the practice standards and the problem solving aspect.
Well said. Thank you both. Appreciate it. There's a question here about the summer course and when that algebra companion course will be offered and what all of the details are in regard to that. Right now, we are in the midst of planning and posting for that that course, and along with project innovation and other middle school offerings, right? So we of course need to find the folks to teach that, and it will, much like project innovation, it covers a 6-week period, right? We anticipate meeting every day, whereas during the school year, it's an every other day course, right? So it would be opposite of, say, physical education or a lab or a study hall, right? Or during the before school or after school, right?
Lily, can you just mention the time span that it would be? So daily, if it's the summer course, is that a 2-hour or 3-hour?
Yep, we're finalizing all of those details as well. Yep, absolutely. So communication will be coming out about that and other opportunities for middle school and high school coming up very soon. All right, there are some other questions about what we're doing about textbooks and why we don't use a single textbook necessarily, and are there any statewide textbooks or statewide approved textbooks that the state encourages us to use? I'll let anyone jump in on that. I'm happy to talk about it too, but.
I guess I can go ahead, Kathleen.
I can jump in personally as a math teacher and answer to that question. we used a textbook years ago, right? But the way a textbook is laid out is the sort of, they show you how to do something. It's there in front of you and you see how they do it and you see the answers. You don't experience it. So we've sort of dropped back from that, and we don't necessarily teach by just showing kids how to do things. We help them experience the things to learn them. So that's oftentimes done better through, like when I talked about multimodal, right? So like there's all sorts of different platforms that you can use to help you do those things. So rather than just hand out a textbook that shows them how to do it, my goal is to help them experience those things to help them learn.
And I would just add to that textbooks tend to be aimed at a particular target audience. They don't tend to offer the differentiated experience that we're going to need. Sure, they might have level A question, level B question, level C question, but the kind of differentiation that we're looking at is much more involved than anything that a textbook series would offer. I think partly it's, so folks who are in this meeting as parents and guardians, you are of a generation where textbook was the way you learned. And we're in the 2020s, and having come out of this pandemic and done all this virtual work, I think textbooks are pretty much a thing of the past and something that can be available as a resource, but not something that we're going to use on a day-to-day, this is the instruction, chapter 1, page 2, so on and so on and so on.
We have had folks reach out for textbooks as resources, and we're happy to provide those for families as they reach out. We do have some that are aligned to the New York State algebra standards, but again, as Susan pointed out and Kathleen mentioned, the sort of shifting tides of standards and the construction of standards is faster than the creation of textbooks at this point. And we've learned to adapt with digital resources for the most part at this point.
Thank you. All right, some questions. We've got some, see, these are not exactly questions. There's some feedback around paper and pencil assignments would be great. Places to go, and again, talking about textbooks versus just a spot to look when needing some support and vocabulary development. So some just kind of some feedback for us around those things. Thanks. There is a question about what does it really mean to talk about differentiating in algebra across both schools. I think that that probably is my fault, that I put that as the header in that slide, and the word differentiate is a little bit of edu-speak right there. So it's really about how do we meet the different needs of kiddos within algebra, right? And for I think a number of years, folks have really felt like if you can get into algebra, then it's up to you to stay, right, in 8th grade. And what Ms. Cole and Ms. Danskin really talking about is we do a lot in order to support the kids who are ready to fly in algebra and the kids who may be struggling with particular concepts, right? And we know that that fluctuates a lot. So because of that, we find our educators are incredible and find a great number of ways to meet those different needs academically for young people. So that's really what we meant. And my apologies for using that edu-speak in there. There's another question about whether the additional course this summer will be offered online or in person. And the answer is currently we are anticipating doing both, right? And trying to figure out a way forward there. There's a question here regarding a full schedule, right? So the kiddos who are taking earth science, algebra, band, and orchestra, what does that mean in terms of a lunch period? Can you all talk about that?
We will not be interfering with the lunch periods of middle school students. Every single middle school student will have a lunch period. Period, end of story. Now, their day may start, right? So if they're doing that companion course, their day may start earlier than other students. If they choose the morning option, they may start their day at 8 or 8:15. Or if they choose the afternoon option, they may end their day later, but there will be no removal of lunch periods. And whenever possible, of course, we're going to offer families the choice of what is your priority preference. Students that before and after school will mostly be for those students who, wait a second, it doesn't fit into my school day. If it fits, like I'm not doing orchestra or band and I have the time slot during the school day, we will do everything we can to schedule it during the school day. But if the students' electives interfere with that, that's why we're providing the morning and the afternoon opportunities.
Thanks. There's a question here, and Carlin, perhaps with your high school experience, you could give us a little insight here. There's a question about later learning and whether students we're seeing greater success later on with some of our high schoolers, given some of the detracking efforts that even started at the high school earlier, and what are some of the things that we're seeing in terms of conceptual knowledge?
Well, I'll try to speak generally, but we had, in my years at the high school, we saw a decrease in issues, just like general social issues. So like when we were engaging students in learning and they were with their group of peers that they had been with for many years, and growing to know that the avoidance students are students from other courses, we saw more general access to social groups and more social groupings forming. That's very anecdotal data, but that was from my sort of associate principal perspective. And honestly, the leveling in ninth grade allowed us to get students sort of ready and able to access later learning in high school, meaning all of our students were having a similar experience in ninth grade, which meant that they could get used to variation in schedule and the size of the school and the social shifts and the new multi-accessible lunches and just the number of changes. And that also allowed us to intervene with students quicker in a more targeted way. So forming sort of like a ninth grade academy where students were phasing into the high school experience, and where when kids were shifting schedules for some unknown reason, it was much better for students because they could stay in the same course in cases of schedule changes. So I could go into more detail about that, but it really did allow for an increase in social community building, and then an increase in our ability to help support all students. And then later in the years, in terms of accessibility and region scores, I would say we're probably in year 3 of that, and we would look at state testing data for ELA, which will be this, I think, upcoming year, but again, has been disrupted by COVID. So I would anticipate that we'll put together sort of a district-wide data narrative that looks at our detracking and de-leveling efforts. One of our biggest indicators of success will be about accessibility to algebra, and then the number of students of all types and varieties and backgrounds accessing higher level math courses later their high school experience. So we have lots of years of data collecting to go, but it's been very, very good so far.
Yeah, Lily, can I jump in? It's not a direct answer to this question, but I wanted to make sure this information was shared at some point. It piggybacks on, and I don't remember who said it, the idea of math not being a race to the finish, building the foundation is our priority. And those different pathways, the slide that Carlin shared that talked about doubling up in 10th grade and taking out geometry and algebra 2. Just wanted to point out that in terms of students being ready, some kids like mathematically are ready, but just like they have other interests and they're not ready to do this in 8th grade. And by 10th grade, they've kind of think, okay, that's, you know, this is my priority at this point, and they're ready to go. Steve Weisberg shared that in the calculus courses at the high school, approximately 1/3 of the students who are taking calculus now are students who went through the double up option in 10th grade. So if you are sitting at home afraid that if my kid does not take algebra next year, there is no way they're going to take calculus, 1/3 of the course is students who have not taken algebra as 8th graders. And they're having equal, you know, again, anecdotally, equivalent success with the students who have accelerated in 8th grade.
And
Thanks, Lily.
I would also add that when students get to the high school, they can opt into honors level experiences for courses. That's not the case necessarily for algebra the way that we're speaking about it now, but it helps you understand that what we're doing is helping kids figure out their passion and their love and their interest, and prioritizing those in those classes. So again, speaking beyond math, that kids that love and are interested in certain subjects can certainly accelerate or endeavor into harder experiences within those courses. So that's just something to keep in mind. And I know Donna would mirror that with her own child's experience into 9th grade as well.
Thank you all. There are a number of questions that are coming in, and I know we have just a few minutes left. So I want to try to get through them. There are a number of questions about acceleration tests that may occur later in a student's schooling career in middle school. And at this time, we have the assessment for those entering 6th graders, and we have the assessment for those who want to go into algebra in after 7th grade, right? So if they wanted to take that test at the end because they felt like they didn't really get those 3s on those key standards that Dan talked about before, then those are those two points and those two tests. All right. And then so there's another question. So there's a great deal of questions about that. So I hope that clarifies that for folks. And then there's a number of questions regarding whether a student can take the algebra companion course in a different grade. So would they be able to take it in 7th grade, or would they be able to take it even before that? And the answer is right now, students can take it the summer before their 8th grade year, or during their 8th grade year, or never because they test out. We're not offering at other times. We've certainly debated this and tried to talk through it, but given the standards and given the standards that we're really supporting students' deep conceptual knowledge of in that algebra companion course, that 8th grade course, right? And given the prerequisite knowledge, we wanted to make sure that kids were successful in that. So that was a really conscious decision. Of course, we ran through a ton of different options in regard to that, but that's why we made that decision. Just so folks are clear here. Folks, did I miss anything in that, colleagues? Okay. Alrighty. Great. Yeah.
I just wanted to add I'm unable to respond to questions that are being sent directly to me, to most people, with the exception of a few folks. I'm not sure why, but I'm making a note. So if you sent me something that's like a personal question or specific to your child, I am writing that down. It's not that I'm ignoring you. I will get back to you later this evening or tomorrow. I just wanted folks to know I see them. I'm just unable to respond for some reason.
Thanks, Lauren. I know all about technical difficulties. I was having them prior to getting on the call, so you're in good company, I suppose. All right. There's another clarifying question regarding the number of students who typically, or the percentage of students that typically test out of Math 6 and go directly to 7. And I would say this year across both schools, did we have 6 or 7 kiddos across both schools that ended up testing out and going directly to 7th grade. So it's typically not in a very large number, but that doesn't necessarily mean that would change. And I see another question about how folks can get a sense of where their kiddos are in relationship to those standards, or just in general in math right now. Is there a good place for them to look, and and if so, what is that best place?
So progress reports and marking period grades for our current 7th graders are standards-based grades. So if you're noticing that your child's math grades throughout the year so far have been 3s and 4s as a 7th grader, they're probably on target for placement into algebra. If you're noticing that your child is getting 2s with a 3 here or there, maybe not quite ready for algebra. And of course, there are all variations in between, but that would be for an immediate picture of where your child stands. That would be your best bet. Before the end of the year, before we offer that test, we will be communicating with each individual family. This is based on what happened during the school year, based on the standards-based grading on those 6 topics or concepts that Dan mentioned earlier. We will be communicating with you at this point. Your child is being placed in this course as an 8th grader, and then that would be the opportunity to say, we'd like to take the test that Dan mentioned, or the portions of the test that Dan mentioned. Again, it's all about demonstration of mastery. We're really trying to eliminate the more subjective, does this student complete all of their homework? It's more about their level of comprehension. So pay attention to the comments about understanding, and if your child has been getting 2s, encourage additional participation in their course and see if for the remainder of the year they can be improving.
Thank you. All right. We have another, I think probably one last question that we haven't gotten to, and we actually have to wrap up here. And that is that if there are only a few students who are signed up to take the algebra companion course before school or after school, will we still run the class during that time? And the answer is we typically have a cutoff of, it's closer to, about 15 typically. We might be able to kind of shift that given the newness of this all, but we also have to be cognizant of taxpayer dollars and allocating full-time equivalency, educators to that course. So we may indicate to families that they have to make a different option or make a different choice. But obviously, we want to eliminate barriers and make things work as much as possible. It also might be a situation where if we recruited some more folks, we would be able to run that section.
Or Lily, I keep picturing the possibility of students from Boynton and DeWitt both engaging in a virtual course. if there were 7 kids at DeWitt and 10 kids at Boynton who wanted a morning session, that perhaps a virtual offering instead of an in-person offering might work for that.
Yeah, and so much has opened up. I mean, when we think about the course itself and building it into Canvas now, that so much has really opened up. There's so much, obviously, that's been so challenging about the pandemic, but this technology has also opened up so many possibilities in terms of what we can do and what we would want to do for kiddos. All right, folks, thank you so much for spending an hour with us on this beautiful Monday evening. Get outside, enjoy the last moments of the sunset. Thank you all. Thank you, Kathleen, Donna, Susan, Lauren, Carlin, Dan, and thank you to all the caregivers who joined us this evening. Take care, be well, be safe. Bye, everyone. Thank you.